everyone. I am out in the garden and it is time for a bit of a tomato harvest. I am working on picking some Roma tomatoes fresh from the garden to make some fresh canned homemade salsa. So these Roma tomatoes, when they get almost ripe, they start just falling off the vine. They are begging to be picked. It's gonna rain tonight, so I want to get as many picked as possible so that we can work on this. Today and tomorrow we're going to be working on salsa. We're going to be working on pizza sauce and another recipe. So join us back in the kitchen in just a little bit. Well, it seems like about every time I'm out here in the garden, there's a few more onions that are ready to harvest, and I keep getting about a 5-gallon bucket. A 5-gallon bucket is roughly about a half of a bushel. So if I combine this with what I've already picked, we'll have enough. So a couple of tips in getting started in canning. I want to help you out with your day because it can get overwhelming and to do a lot. So thinking ahead of dinner and tomorrow, I've got some meat thawing. This is getting ready to go into the crock pot so that dinner is already taken care of and I don't have people coming to me saying what's for dinner and I'm just finishing canning and being on my feet all day. I've already pulled out my mason jars and washed them. I'll put 7 of these in the hot water bath canner so that they can preheat when I'm ready. Murdoch harvested me a bunch of onions as shown earlier, and I've already gone through this morning and sauteed my onions. I chopped them up in the food processor and my garlic. An important thing to keep in mind besides your jars and what you might need is your family budget. So I actually got into my supplies and I only have 13 lids available for me today, which means I can do 2 batches and anything excess is going to either have to get used fresh in the refrigerator or put into other containers in the freezer. That way I don't have to go out. So I had mentioned doing salsa. I didn't have any peppers on hand and I didn't have any jalapeno peppers on hand. So we're changing it up and today's recipe is going to be pizza sauce. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and wash and core all my tomatoes and find out what my weight is going to be. So I've got myself set up with a cutting station, a scrap bowl, that'll all go to the chickens. And we've got a bowl for weighing, and of course we're just about zeroed out. We'll have to adjust that a little bit. More zeroed out than I thought. It's a shadow. So we're going to be using up all of our Roma tomatoes today with a few others variety mixed in. These are real easy to core and seed. They're not super watery, they're not super seedy. They're real nice to use for canning. Now I'm just going to show you real quick how I work through my tomatoes because you can have it take a long time. You can sit here fiddling, or you can do it as fast as possible. Now, I'm not using any kind of a strainer or hand processor. I have one of those Victorio tomato puree machines. It's hand crank, it's slow. I'm not a fan of it. I like to run things through the food processor. So I just first start by cutting off the tops and halving my tomatoes, and I just make a big pile. Now this is a good opportunity to sit and listen to something that you can learn from. So old TV shows, movies, documentaries, it's a nice way to do it. Now you could spend time trying to cut out this. I find it's a lot easier to just put your thumb in it and just pull that seed out. And I've been doing it like just right here in my bowl, just kind of going like that. You can take the extra step of running it through a strainer. So then that little core piece, I just take that out and in the bowl it goes. So it's really easy for me to do it this way. And I can get through quite a bit pretty fast. And when you've got a lot of seeds like that, pretty much one shot, and you've got the majority of them out. You could run them through a rinse if you wanted to get all the tomato seeds out. I don't mind a few tomato seeds, it's no problem. And if you're going to seed save, now is the time to pull a few out because you want to spot a couple of your best tomatoes and save the seeds. And then you will be ending up with the strongest, healthiest plants every year without having to go out in March and trying to find seeds that may not be in stock yet. Now the reason you center that out is like this pith in the middle and all of this seedy material. You're going to be adding a lot of water to your sauce that is cooking time that you have to remove it out of there. I'm not a fan of doing tomato paste because I don't want to buy something in, and tomato paste is just condensed tomato. So like I said about doing the salsa, you could have a pot of pizza sauce going on, and you could do this in a crock pot if you were doing pints or half pints. I'm doing quart size today, so I want to do it on a stove in a big pot. A roasting oven would be really good for it, which I don't have. So while that pot is cooking, you could easily be working up another pot with salsa. And a good idea is to keep your eye open for things like cutting boards. I picked this IKEA knife up. It's got a serrated edge. I got this at the thrift store last week for $2 just before I started doing my salsa recipe, and it has been real handy to have because, as you can see here, this is my other serrated blade and it's small, so at the end of the day my hands really start hurting. So this big white one is a lot easier to hang on to. Watch those yard sales, watch the thrift stores for these kinds of materials so that you can stock your pantry. Watch for mason jars. Now some people like to weigh out their tomatoes and have the recipe go by weight or just by like a bushel basket size. I like to have mine processed to have that weight more accurate without the seeds in the water. It's just going to help a little bit with your recipe consistency in the future to be able to follow that. Okay, so my initial half bushel yielded about 10 pounds of tomato. So I went ahead, I got another half bushel so that I could do roughly 18 to 20 pounds. This was a little bit lighter, but in the end I think it's going to all work out. I have probably got about 4 cups of onions, about 6 garlic cloves in here. And we're just going to kind of work this to taste as we go. And I'll put the final recipe in the description down below. Any additional garlic or onion is going to be made up for with seasonings, powdered seasonings. So like I said, I want to make this uncomplicated and simple. You can run it through on pulse. I'm just going to set it to on, and when that looks pretty well pureed, we're going to run it through. I don't want a chunky sauce. And it only takes seconds. This is a Cuisinart 12-cup processor that I have, and it also has a 4-cup bowl that you can use in addition to it. It's been real handy and trustworthy to me. The only flaw that I've had with it all is there's locking tabs here and here, and I've lost them both at this point. And a new bowl is expensive. So see, just a little bit of chunk. I'll just drain the rest of it off and reserve that one to be chopped again. Now my onions and garlic have already been sauteed to translucent and soft, so I'm going ahead and putting this on a low heat just to kind of start pre-warming this sauce, and then going through my entire batch and gradually adding it, the 12 cups or whatever at a time. Okay, so the pot is on, it's boiling. I'd like to actually turn this down a little bit. I want it to simmer and thicken. I don't want it to overheat. This is a real heavy bottom pot. I have one that is more restaurant grade and it's very thin. It is good for soups and stews on like a warming table. You don't want to use something real thin like that for these sauces, because then you end up burning the bottom of your pot, and that's not going to help at all. Good time to do cleanup of washing all your food processor parts. So that is all going to get washed up here in a second. But I wanted to tell you about my ingredients. So I don't use sugar in our cooking. We usually either use honey or maple syrup. And I put in about 4 teaspoons of maple syrup and just a little bit of oil when you're sauteing your onions and garlic. So use whatever oil you prefer. I use sunflower oil today. We usually use sunflower oil or olive oil in our sauteing. And I've got about 4 teaspoons of black pepper. I used my own homemade Italian seasoning, which is basically parsley, oregano, basil, and rosemary with a pinch of marjoram in it also. Not margarine, marjoram. And about 2 teaspoons of salt. Now when I bottle this or can it, I'm going to add a teaspoon or 2 of lemon juice. It's normally a teaspoon per pint. Because I'm using quarts, I'm going to do that right in the quart jar. It helps with the acidity with water bath canning. And you can add tomato paste to thicken it if you need to. I, however, am just going to cook it down until it's the thickness that we like it. So once it's, you know, all the seasons are married together, we'll do a taste test and see if we need to adjust it a little bit. I decided to go ahead and add about a 1/4 cup of minced onion just because I felt like it needed a little bit more, and I really didn't feel like going and chopping more onions right now. So we've been cooking down for at least an hour, and you can see I've reduced it from up here to down there. We've lost about 2 to 2.5 inches of water or so. That's pretty good. Now, as a general rule, as you're cooking this down, once you've reduced it by 1/3, it's just a nice sauce. And if you go a little bit more, it's about a thick sauce. If you go about half or more, you're down to tomato paste consistency. And with tomato paste, you want to be canning in pint and half-pint jars to make sure that that heat permeates the thick sauce. So we want to keep that in mind. I'm going to be canning these in quarts, and my quarts just came out of the canner. They're all nice and hot. We scalded the lids in bands, so they're about to all get filled. I just wanted to show you the finished sauce. So at this point, if there's anything you want to change about it with your taste test, go ahead and add anything or take anything away. Now, the way this sauce is now, I could go either way with it for pizza sauce, or could cook it a little bit more and add, you know, maybe a little more Italian seasoning and have it be spaghetti sauce. It's just a nice goulash flavor right now. Not too tomatoey. If you have a strong tomato taste, I usually find that a little bit of sugar or salt will kind of help ease that acidity flavor of that. So good tip to know. So we're going to go ahead and fill these up. We're wanting anywhere from 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch headspace. Some people like it a little bit less, but I don't like to have that siphoning. So I like to go with 1 inch headspace or just to the neck of the jar. So you want to make sure that your tops of your jars are all wiped clean. I actually use the hot water that I use for scalding my lids and bands. And I am going to seal these up. And finger tight, always finger tight. Don't try to really crank on them. I added my tablespoon of lemon juice to each jar. Some people like to use citric acid, and I have read anywhere from 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons per quart jar. In the past, I've never added citric acid to it. I've just been kind of trying to find and follow best practices. So these are going to all go in for 40 minutes, and the water bath canner is already hot. You could pressure can these. I don't have green peppers or a lot of other things. There's not enough onions to unbalance the acidity level, and that's the reason for the citric acid and the lemon juice. I think it's just more or less an insurance policy. And I got, out of that almost 20 pounds, 7 full quarts. And another quart to be able to make pizza. Now I chose quarts because we generally make 4 big homemade pizzas. And from those 4 pizzas, I usually would have to open up 3 store-bought cans of like 12-ounce tomato sauce, pizza sauce, or I would buy a big can of tomato sauce, maybe add a little tomato paste, and make my own on the stovetop as I was making my dough. So these are going to go right into the can. Now when you load your canner, load it evenly around the edges so that it's not rocking and tipping so much. So your canning rack has little notches to be able to pull the whole rack off and set it on the edge. And if you start loading it here or here, it's going to want to rock. So I always put my first 2 jars right there to weigh that down on that rim. And then I crisscross how I'm going to do it and save the center one for last. So now we're just going to lower this down and put the lid on and bring it back up to a boil. With water, the idea with water bath canning is that your jars are underwater. And I have heard in general about 1 inch. I've heard some people say 2 inches. So use what's best to you. I usually just say, okay, 1 inch, I'm going to have some steam evaporation, and we want to make sure that they're all fully submerged. It's not like pressure canning. With my pressure canner, you only put in up to 3 quarts of water. So we'll listen as that boils, then we'll set the timer for the 40 minutes. You want to bring that to a boil. Don't start the 40 minutes now because they will be under processed. They won't seal. You won't have the proper time of that, and sometimes you get what's called a false seal, and then they'll open up in your pantry and you'll go look at it one day and you've got overflowing gross botulism tomatoes all over your shelf. Ask me how I know. A tip I forgot to share with you, and that I lost track of time to do, is to add a couple of tablespoons of vinegar, white vinegar. If you don't have it, you can use apple cider vinegar to your water bath. It helps prevent this white scaliness. Our water softener actually has not reset since we had a storm recently, so I probably have a little more than usual, but you see it just wipes right off. So I'll just take care of that after these have cooled. If you can hear in the background, we have a window air conditioner running. These have to sit here and cool naturally on their own for 24 hours. So I'm going to cover these with a towel just to prevent any draft from hitting them. And we'll come back and do a taste test for this on another day. So it is actually haymaking season. I needed back outside to take care of that, take care of the cows. So I'm going to get on with that. We have that 3/4 jar of pizza sauce. I'm going to pick up supplies so we can make that tomorrow. So watch for that video coming up soon. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.